Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tackling a stage of life that, well, it gets a pretty bad rap, doesn't it? Midlife.
It really does. Full of cliches, cultural dread, those questionable movie depictions.
Exactly. Forget the whole flashy sports car cliche or the, sudden dramatic blow up. We're talking about something deeper.
A more subtle shift.
Yeah, that often silent internal shift, that feeling that the autopilot settings you maybe set up in your 20s or 30s, they just feel broken.
Right. It's that moment where you kind of look in the mirror and think, okay, who am I now?
And maybe the slightly terrifying question, where is the rest of my life actually going?
Hmm. And that tension you just described, that need for reevaluation, that's really the core of our deep dive mission today.
So what's the plan?
Our goal is to really distinguish the popular myth, the spectacular midlife crisis, from the reality.
It is.
Which is that midlife is a really significant, complex, and crucially, potentially transformative developmental stage.
Okay. And how are we approaching this? What sources are we using?
We've synthesized a pretty rich stack of sources. We're pulling from deep psychological research on personality change, cultural studies looking at aging narratives, self-realization.
And the practical stuff, too.
Oh, yeah. And the precise behavioral science behind, like, intentional habit formation, career pivots, real-world application.
Okay, so essentially we're trying to give you, the listener, a kind of roadmap to move beyond getting stuck, beyond stagnation, and maybe seize control of your own evolving story.
That's the idea. We'll cover everything from the science of what's called volitional personality change.
Which sounds intriguing, proving you can actually intentionally shift your traits.
Exactly, even those deep-seated ones. And we'll also get into the specific, daily practices that seem to differentiate the people who really thrive in midlife from those who, well, get stuck.
All right, let's unpack that central contradiction first then. Culturally, midlife and researchers usually peg this somewhere between, 45 and 65?
Yeah, roughly that window.
It's presented as this, sudden, almost inevitable emotional breakdown, the crisis.
The big dramatic event.
But when you look at the actual data, the picture seems way more nuanced, maybe even resistant to that label.
Absolutely. That term midlife crisis, it's become a real cultural lightning rod. It was popularized quite a while back by some really influential theorists, people like Carl Jung, Daniel Levinson.
Right, I've heard those names.
And they describe this period as one of, intense mental distress, maybe depression, significant life upheavals, all tied strictly to hitting that middle-age bracket.
So the idea was you hit 45, boom, crisis mode.
Kind of. But here's the thing. When later psychological research, the more quantitative stuff, tried to actually validate this idea,
They couldn't find it.
you found extensive evidence that simply does not support the existence of a specific age-related crisis that, everyone supposedly goes through. It's just not there in the broad data.
Okay, so if the universal explosive crisis is largely a myth, then where does that deep feeling of restlessness come from? Or you hear about burnout rates being high in middle age. Why the disconnect?
Yeah, that's a great question. The disconnect seems to lie in scale and attribution. Probably not a single explosion for most people.
More like a slow burn.
Or maybe an accumulation of significant stressors, often happening concurrently around the same time.
Ah, okay.
See, midlife is really characterized by this complex interplay of multiple roles and what researchers call biopsychosocial changes.
Break that down, biopsychosocial.
Sure. So biologically, this period often involves things like hormonal shifts, maybe subtle declines in physical stamina or energy that forces a reckoning with, mortality, physical limits.
Okay, the body changes.
And psychologically, you're often dealing with what's called role compression.
Role compression.
Yeah, like you might be simultaneously caring for aging parents and managing your kids, launching into adulthood, and trying to maintain a really demanding career. It's a squeeze.
Wow, yeah. Pulled in many directions.
Exactly. And then socially, you might be seeing the death of peers or your parents passing away, which drastically alters your perception of time, of remaining opportunities.
So the volume of stress is genuinely high.
The volume is high, definitely. But here's the interesting part. The research also suggests the middle-aged adult is often actually better equipped to manage it than other age groups might be.
Wait, better equipped? Even with all that pressure, that sounds counterintuitive. How?
Well, it comes back to experience. Our sources really highlight that middle-aged adults have generally developed far more adaptive coping skills.
Ah, learned resilience.
Yeah, exactly. Drawn from decades of previous life experiences, successes, failures, navigating adversity. They tend to rely on two main psychological strategies for adjustment. And knowing the difference is pretty vital for navigating this stage well.
Okay, let's define those clearly. What are the two
The
strategies?
first one is called assimilation, or sometimes primary control.
Assimilation, primary control. Got it.
This is when you're still actively making desired changes to the situation or your environment because, well, your goals feel attainable. You exert primary control to try and make the world fit your desires.
Okay, so give me an example.
Let's say you really dislike your job. If you still have the energy, the marketability, the opportunity to move, assimilation means actively changing that job. You change the external reality.
So when life throws you a problem you can actually solve, you use assimilation. You change the situation.
Precisely.
What happens when the challenge feels insurmountable? When you can't change the external situation?
That's when you need to shift gears.
Yeah.
That's when you employ the second strategy, accommodation or secondary control.
Accommodation, secondary control.
Right. This is the psychological strategy you use when you face an obstacle that feels irreversible or fixed, something you genuinely cannot change externally.
So instead of changing the world,
You adjust aspects of yourself, your identity, your goals, your expectations, to resolve that discrepancy between what you want and what's possible.
can you give a concrete example where assimilation just wouldn't work and accommodation becomes necessary?
Absolutely. Think about a lifelong competitive runner, someone whose identity is really tied up in running marathons.
Okay.
Now, imagine they get diagnosed with chronic, irreversible knee arthritis. Assimilation, trying to force themselves to keep running those marathons, is just going to lead to pain, injury, frustration. It won't work.
Right. The external reality, the knee won't budge.
Exactly. So, accommodation, on the other hand, means accepting that physical change. It might mean letting go, grieving perhaps, the identity of marathon runner, and adjusting the goal.
Oh.
Maybe they become a competitive cycler instead, or perhaps a swimming coach. They adjust their expectations about appearance, maybe accept physical changes more broadly. Or, in a different context, adjusting professional ambition after a major industry shift makes their old role obsolete.
So it's about flexibility, knowing when to push the world and when to adjust yourself.
That is the hallmark of midlife resilience, according to these sources, that flexibility.
I really like that framing. It moves away from crisis and towards pragmatic self-management. And it sounds like for many people, recognizing these limitations, maybe mastering accommodation, paradoxically brings a new sense of power.
Precisely. It's a fascinating finding. For many, midlife brings this powerful, almost liberating sense of new freedom.
Freedom? How so?
The subjective feeling, what people report, is often that they've kind of earned the right to live more authentically. We see consistent feedback in the research about feeling allowed to say no.
Ah, setting boundaries.
Yes. Individuals, maybe especially those who spent decades prioritizing family needs or climbing a professional ladder, suddenly feel they can pursue activities without needing, say, a specific degree, or without seeking approval from their grown children or their community.
Less defined by those old external expectations.
Exactly. Less defined by expectations maybe set decades prior. There's this urgency, this sense of, if not now, when?
And that urgency, that sense of freedom, it really feels like the pivot point, doesn't it? It forces a choice.
It absolutely does.
You either embrace this adaptable mindset, you re-examine maybe your limiting views on aging, you forge new purpose, or
Or you slide more passively, which brings us right to the other side of the coin. The danger of stagnation.
right.
The alternative to grabbing that choice, to exercising your agency, is, well, putting it simply, the stagnation trap.
The stagnation trap sounds ominous.
It kind of is. It's the danger of unfulfilled potential. And one source summarized it in a way that really stuck with me as dying with the music still inside of you.
Wow. That's a profoundly resonant image. It makes stagnation sound like not just laziness, but like an active failure to express something vital.
That's a good way to put it, an active failure.
So what are the psychological warning signs? How does someone know if they're slipping into that trap?
Well, the research points quite strongly to chronic boredom as a really significant psychological warning sign in midlife.
Chronic boredom, not just, having a slow Tuesday after.
No, deeper than that. The suggestion is that this kind of persistent boredom in midlife is rarely benign. It often signals one of two more deeply entrenched psychological issues.
Okay. What are those two issues?
First, the boredom might actually be rooted in an inability to connect with core vital emotions. Things like rage or real excitement or even fear.
Why would someone disconnect from those?
Often it's a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
The mind, maybe protecting itself from emotional pain from past adverse experiences, has kind of compartmentalized these powerful feelings,
So to avoid pain, you shut down everything.
including the good stuff.
Yeah.
When you disconnect from that vital source of energy, the world just feels flat, unstimulating. You're sort of emotionally anesthetized.
Huh. So boredom isn't just, I have nothing interesting to do. It can be an emotional shield, a kind of self-sabotage.
Exactly. The brain thinks it's protecting you from past pain, but it inadvertently cuts off the very source of feeling, which includes excitement, passion, curiosity.
Okay, that's one root cause. What's the second?
The second cause is maybe less deep-seated, but still paralyzing. It's genuine understimulation combined with a kind of defensive paralysis.
Fine.
Meaning, there's a real need for novelty, for new interests, for challenge, but the individual feels stuck. They lack the motivation, or maybe they've lost access to knowing what they truly want or need anymore. So you get this miserable mix of restlessness, maybe anxiety, and disengagement.
Right. Wanting something different, but having no idea what or how to get it.
Precisely. That's the stagnation trap in action.
So if that's the trap, the necessary response, the way out, must be this growth imperative you mentioned. How do philosophers and psychologists talk about growth at this stage?
Well, philosophically, growth in midlife and beyond is really tightly linked to this idea of self-realization.
Self-realization, big concept.
It is. But at its core, it's about achieving the good life, however you define that, by making the absolute best of yourself, given your inherent capacities and your external circumstances.
Making the best of what you've got.
Essentially, yes. And crucially, it's fundamentally future-oriented. Or, the term used is often teleological.
Okay, hang on. Teleological. That sounds like a heavy philosophical term. Can you translate that for someone just trying to figure out the 50s?
Sure. Teleological just means goal-oriented, purpose-driven.
Ah, okay. Focused on the future.
Exactly. It means focusing less on past regrets or maybe current limitations, and more on the future self you're actively trying to become.
Got it.
And self-realization in this context, it requires developing what's called moral agency.
Moral agency.
Yeah, it's defined generally as the ability to live well, both with and for others, according to your own deepest aspirations and your best capacities. It's about being a full, contributing, morally engaged member of society defined by your own chosen values, not just inheriting them.
That sounds powerful, but also challenging because, as you mentioned earlier, we're constantly bombarded by cultural messages that fight against this very idea, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Messages that basically say, you're past your prime, your best years are done.
Those are exactly the pervasive and frankly harmful decline narratives about aging.
Yeah.
And they're potent fuel for stagnation.
How so?
They suggest that once you hit a certain age, life just becomes an exercise in, like, managing decline and minimizing loss. It strips away the potential for growth.
So what's the antidote? How do we reframe that?
The reframe view, the one that actively supports moral agency, has to focus instead on narratives of becoming.
Narratives of becoming. I like that.
It's an approach that acknowledges that life paths are incredibly individualized. It celebrates later life's potential not just for decline, but for deepening wisdom, for increased complexity, for continued growth.
The narrative approach feels really powerful here because it puts the pen back in the individual's hand. You get to be the author, the editor of your own story.
Beautifully put, it allows for radical rewriting, even late in the game.
And our sources actually have some incredible, really tangible examples of people doing just that, right? Embracing this idea of becoming. It grounds the concept.
Totally. This isn't just abstract self-help theory. This is empirical life change.
Yeah.
We see anecdotes like the person who adopts a daily mantra, something like, every day, I'm the youngest, wisest version of myself on the planet today.
That's a powerful daily narrative shift right there.
Isn't it? Then look at the massive career shifts that get cited.
Yeah.
There's the example of the woman who spent, say, 15 years in a successful marketing career.
Okay.
And then pivots entirely at 38 to become a radiologic technologist, realizing her sense of purpose lay somewhere completely different in direct care.
Wow, that's a big change.
Huge. Or consider the electrician. 2 decades in the trade, stable income, good skills.
Right.
Goes back to school at 41 for a computer science degree. Knowing that the intellectual challenge, the learning, would provide the stimulation he desperately needed.
So these are people actively using that assimilation and accommodation we talked about. They're changing their external world and their internal identity.
Exactly. In tandem. And maybe the most radical example that came up was the woman over 60 who just embraced total discontinuity. She rented out her flat in England, bought a touring bicycle.
No way.
Yep. And has now traveled, I think the source said, over 24,000 miles across multiple continents on her bike.
That's incredible. What drove that?
According to the story, it was fueled by this stark recognition that the clock is ticking. And the identity she thought she should have, the quiet retirement one, was totally replaceable by the identity she actually wanted to have.
That is definitive proof, isn't it? That the possibility for profound self-recreation doesn't just vanish at 50 or 60.
Not at all. It clearly does not have an expiration date.
Okay, so seeing those inspiring examples, the natural question becomes how? How do you actually pull that off? How do you intentionally change those really deep-seated personality traits like wanting to be more extroverted or more conscientious, or maybe less anxious when they feel so fixed?
Oh, but they feel like bedrock sometimes.
Yeah, and the science seems to point towards something specific here called Volitional Personality Change, or VPC.
That's right, VPC. It stands for Self-Directed Change of Personality Traits, working towards specific personal change goals.
And why is this so critical?
Well, it's critical because personality traits aren't just, abstract labels we stick on people. They genuinely predict a huge range of crucial life outcomes.
Like what?
Things like relationship success and stability, physical health, longevity, educational attainment, career success. The list goes on.
So if you can intentionally change the core traits.
You can potentially fundamentally change your life's trajectory. It's that significant.
Okay. But the studies on VPC also reveal this massive, really frustrating hurdle that seems to trip up most people who try to self-improve. This thing called the intention-action gap.
Yes. The psychological canyon, I call it.
Why canyon?
Because it's wide and deep. The research is pretty clear. Simply having a conscious goal to change your personality, like deciding, okay, I want to become a significantly more conscientious person.
Yeah.
That intention alone is only weakly related to actual, measurable personality change.
Only weekly? That seems weird. You'd think wanting it would be the main driver.
You would think, but it gets even stranger. Some studies actually showed mixed results, or even a counterintuitive finding.
Which was?
That in some cases, strongly wanting to increase a trait, like conscientiousness, was sometimes correlated with an unwanted decrease in that very trait over time.
Wait, what? Setting an intention to be better at something could actually make you worse at it? How does that even work?
Yeah, it's baffling at first glance. The research suggests this might happen when the intention is disconnected from realistic action planning.
Okay.
Individuals who have really strong intentions but vague plans often set goals that are too global, like be more organized or maybe too aggressive. I'll finish this huge project by tomorrow.
Setting themselves up for failure.
Exactly. It leads to inevitable failure, which then leads to discouragement, maybe self-criticism.
Which reinforces the negative belief, see, I can't change, I'm just not an organized person.
Precisely. Thereby potentially decreasing the trait further. And this isn't a small effect. Global studies confirm the size of this gap. Somewhere between, say, 36% and 55% of people consistently fail to convert their clear intentions into real-world action. That's huge.
Wow. Almost half of us, or more, get stuck in the intention phase. So the key isn't the motivation or the intention itself, it's building the bridge over that gap.
That's it. You need the bridge.
What does the VPC research identify as that bridge? What actually works?
The absolute necessity of action and completion.
Behavioral follow-through.
Action and completion.
Yep. VPC interventions, even ones that are highly scalable and relatively low-key, like digital apps or online programs,
They actually work.
they successfully promote desired personality changes. The research shows an average effect size of about $2.22.
Okay, $2, to put that in plain language for us. Is that big,
Small.
meaningful?
It's generally considered a small to moderate effect size, but it's robustly reliable across studies. And importantly, these effects aren't just temporary boosts.
They often last or even increase during follow-up periods, sometimes rising to an effect size around $3.377.
Okay, $2.377.
So a more solid, moderate effect over time. What does that tell us?
It tells us the change is real and sustainable. It's an effect size comparable to well-established interventions in other fields, like clinical psychology. It confirms that intentional personality change is viable.
But how? What's the mechanism?
The mechanism is precise, and this is crucial, just setting the goals, or even accepting behavioral challenges offered in these programs that did not predict trait change.
So just saying, okay, I'll try that, wasn't enough.
Nope. Only actually completing the behavioral challenges, performing the specific trait-typical behaviors consistently, only that predicted the desired change in traits like extroversion, conscientiousness, and emotional stability.
It's all about the doing, the follow-through.
It is 100% about the doing.
Can you walk us through what one of those behavioral completion challenges might look like? Let's pick, say, emotional stability. Someone wants to worry less, be less reactive. Okay, good example. So if the goal is increasing emotional stability, the challenge wouldn't just be worry less. That's too vague, right? Back to the intention gap.
Right. How do you measure worrying less?
Exactly. So a specific challenge might be something like, for the next 3 days, whenever you face a situation that triggers stress or worry, take 2 minutes to identify and write down 3 specific resources, maybe people, places, skills, past successes that you have successfully used to cope with stress before.
Ah, concrete action. Identify resources.
Yes, and successfully completing that task, actually identifying and reflecting on those resources consistently, that is the completed trait typical behavior that builds emotional stability over time.
Okay. And for something like extroversion?
Maybe the challenge is successfully initiate 3 brief social interactions with new acquaintances or strangers this week. Not just waiting for someone else to talk to you, but actively, gently initiating. Again, the focus is on the specific, measurable doing.
It really shifts the focus from grand intentions to small, consistent actions.
That's the core finding.
So what are the key components of these successful VPC interventions? What helps people actually push through and complete those actions?
They typically integrate a focused set of elements. First, there's usually psychoeducation and goal setting,
Meaning?
helping the person understand how personality works, why change is possible, and then setting very specific, achievable micro goals.
Okay.
Second, and most critical, is behavioral activation and practice. That's the doing part, structured through these small, manageable challenges.
Makes sense. What else?
Third, they often target common change factors. Things like helping people gain insight into their current patterns, building discrepancy awareness, that felt gap between who you are now and who you want to be.
Using that tension constructively.
Exactly. And also focusing on strength orientation, leveraging the strengths you already have to help you achieve the new goals. It's not all deficit focus.
Right. Building on what works.
And finally, a really powerful tool they often use is specific pre-plan if-then plans.
If-then plans, like coding for your brain.
Kind of. It's like, if I encounter situation X, the trigger for the unwanted behavior, then I will immediately do behavior Y, the desired new behavior. For example, if I feel tempted to procrastinate on my project, then I will immediately spend just 5 minutes organizing my workspace.
Ah, it automates the response, takes the willpower debate out of the moment.
Precisely. It creates an automatic link, making follow-through much more likely.
Okay, so knowing that consistent behavior, that completion, is the absolute engine of change. Let's get really practical. How can people leverage this midlife period, maybe this feeling of restlessness, as a necessary growth phase?
Great question.
We know something like, 40% of our daily actions are just pure habit, controlling so much our wealth, relationships, happiness.
Or unhappiness. Habits cut both ways.
Right. So how do we break those deeply ingrained old patterns, especially the unhelpful ones, and actually implant new, better habits? It feels like fighting gravity sometimes.
It does require effort, no doubt. But the research points to a particularly powerful time to do this: strategically leveraging habit discontinuity.
Habit discontinuity. What's that?
It refers to any major or permanent life change. Things like starting a completely new job or career path, moving to a new house or city, or entering a distinctly new life stage, like retirement, or perhaps when the kids finally leave home.
Why are those moments so potent for changing habits? Why not just, start a new habit next Monday?
You can try starting next Monday, but it's often harder because your existing behavioral patterns, your habits, are deeply embedded within your current environment and routine.
The cues are everywhere.
Exactly. Your old cues, the location of your coffee machine, the route you automatically drive home, the time you instinctively check email, they all trigger the old habits. But during a discontinuity, like moving house,
Everything is different. The cues are gone.
your autopilot is temporarily suspended. Researchers actually find that if you target interventions, say, within 3 months of someone moving, they're significantly more likely to adopt new routines like exercising more or eating healthier.
Because the brain hasn't reestablished all those automatic environmental triggers yet.
Precisely. And midlife, by its very nature, often introduces these discontinuities, kids leaving, career shifts, maybe relocation. It offers this necessary window, this disruption for intentional change.
Okay, so seize the disruption. If we manage to successfully leverage that window, what specific daily practices should we prioritize? The sources mentioned rich habits.
Yes, rich habits is a term used in some of the research comparing financially successful individuals with those who consistently struggle. It often highlights specific, consistent daily practices that correlate with success, often quite independent of raw intelligence or background.
Interesting. What kind of habits are we talking about?
Well, several come up repeatedly. Things like reading for at least 30 minutes daily, specifically for self-education or skill improvement. Not just novels, but targeted learning. This builds expertise and adaptability, really critical for midlife career relevance.
Continuous learning. Makes sense.
Engaging in about 30 minutes of aerobic exercise daily. And this one is critical because it's often flagged as a keystone habit.
Keystone habit.
Meaning it doesn't just improve your physical health. The sources show it consistently boosts confidence, elevates mood, reduces stress, and it tends to motivate other healthier choices, like better sleep patterns or healthier eating.
Because you feel psychologically invested in your overall well-being once you start moving.
Exactly. It creates a positive ripple effect.
Yeah.
Other habits include completing at least 70% of your planned daily tasks. This focuses on realistic consistency over burnout-inducing perfectionism. It builds that conscientiousness trait incrementally.
Progress, not perfection.
Right. Saving a minimum of 10% of earnings consistently. This builds long-term financial security, which directly lowers anxiety and increases your sense of future agency and choice.
Financial peace of mind. Huge.
And finally, actively nurturing relationships with success-minded, positive individuals. Your environment matters immensely. Surrounding yourself with people who are also pursuing growth inherently raises your own standards and provides that crucial social structure for your new narrative.
It really sounds like sustained success or growth isn't achieved through one massive heroic effort, but through like a dozen, maybe mundane, but consistent actions applied daily.
That nails it. It reinforces that VPC principle of behavioral completion, just on a daily scale.
Okay. And to navigate the inevitable stress and vulnerability that comes with trying to make these big changes, trying to grow and maybe recreate yourself, what other tools become essential?
Two tools consistently come up as indispensable during this period: mindfulness and self-compassion.
All right, let's start with mindfulness. We hear that word a lot. How does practicing being present actually help when you're facing difficult, major life decisions, like a big career pivot or a significant financial choice?
Mindfulness is identified as a key decision-making factor, primarily because it helps create crucial space between an emotion, an impulse, and your reaction.
Space to think.
Yes, it encourages you to act more in accordance with your deeper purpose and core values, rather than just reacting rashly out of fear or maybe excitement or anxiety.
How does it help with bad decisions?
It's particularly powerful, the research suggests, in preventing you from getting caught up in things like the sunk cost fallacy.
Ah, the sunk cost fallacy. Explain that quickly.
That's the idea that you feel you must continue investing time, energy, or money into something. Could be a career path, a relationship, a project, simply because you've already invested so much in the past, even if it's clearly not working anymore.
Right. Throwing good money after bad, essentially.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps you see that more clearly. It helps you act despite uncertainty, thoughtfully balancing your intuition with colder logic, without being railroaded by past investments or immediate emotional reactions.
Okay, that's mindfulness. What about self-compassion? Again, a term we hear often, but it sometimes gets mistaken for just like self-pity or maybe an excuse to avoid accountability. How is it different?
That distinction is absolutely crucial. Self-pity generally involves over-identification with your emotional pain.
Over-identification.
Yeah, you become completely absorbed by your feelings. You might view your suffering as totally unique, isolating yourself, making other perspectives feel inaccessible. It's kind of wallowing.
Okay. So how is self-compassion different?
Self-compassion, by sharp contrast, requires what the researchers call an equilibrated mental perspective, which is basically mindfulness in action applied to your suffering.
Equilibrated, balanced.
Right. It avoids the extremes. You're not over-identifying and getting lost in the pain, but you're also not disassociating or pretending it doesn't hurt.
So what do?
You allow for non-judgmental observation of the pain or the failure. You recognize that suffering, making mistakes, feeling inadequate, it's part of the shared human experience. Everyone feels this way sometimes.
Not just me.
Exactly. And then from that balanced perspective, you extend kindness toward yourself, the same kindness you might offer a struggling friend.
Ah, so it gives you the mental space needed to learn from mistakes, to persevere without being completely crushed by them.
Perfect said. It fuels resilience rather than
Yes.
resignation.
Okay. So if someone is embarking on this intentional growth journey, using mindfulness, using self-compassion,
Hmm.
what are the common roadblocks? The sources mentioned some growth gaps.
Yes, because growth is fundamentally not automatic. People tend to neglect it for some very predictable reasons, these gaps.
What's the first one?
The assumption gap. Just assuming growth happens automatically because you get older or have more experiences, it doesn't. It requires intention and effort.
Okay, don't assume it'll just happen. What's next?
The timing gap. Always believing now isn't the right time to start the hard work of change. I'll do it when things calm down, which of course they rarely do.
The someday maybe trap.
Exactly. Then there's probably the most common one, the mistake gap. This is that paralyzing fear of failure, or maybe the fear of trading the security of the known, even if it's unfulfilling, for the risk of the unknown.
Better the devil you know.
That kind of thinking keeps people stuck. And finally, there's the inspiration gap.
The inspiration gap.
Yeah, waiting until you feel like doing it. Waiting for motivation or inspiration to strike before taking action.
Which might never come.
Often doesn't. And this really reinforces that core lesson we saw with VPC. Discipline, not fleeting inspiration, is the true, consistent bridge between your goals and actually accomplishing them. You have to act even when you don't feel like it. #5. Redefining purpose and identity in context.
Okay, so as we move into this, maybe the final stage of this intentional midlife shift, the ultimate goal seems to be about redefining who you are and where you're going. It's about crafting a personal story, a narrative that feels more authentic, more teleological, as you put it, than maybe the one you previously constructed or perhaps just inherited.
That's a really good way to frame it. Identity, especially as we age, is best understood as being narratively constituted.
Narratively constituted, meaning we make it up as we go along.
Well, not quite randomly.
No.
But we are fundamentally storytellers.
Yeah.
We constantly engage in this process of storytelling to transform what might otherwise feel like a messy pile of unconnected experiences, random events, successes, failures,
Into something coherent.
into a cohesive, meaningful life story. Psychologists call this achieving narrative coherence. And for older people, achieving this narrative integration is incredibly powerful. It allows them to find meaning, a sense of uniqueness.
And it serves as an antidote.
Yes, it serves as the most powerful personal antidote to those negative cultural stereotypes, those pervasive decline narratives we talked about earlier. Your personal story can trump the cultural script.
So crafting a new identity in midlife isn't necessarily about discovering some single, hidden, immutable truth about your real self. It sounds more like becoming a really skilled editor and interpreter of your own history.
Precisely. That's a fantastic metaphor. You select which events are significant, you interpret their meaning, and crucially, you decide how to link those chapters together to create meaning and, importantly, direction for the future.
Okay. But there's a vital counterpoint here, isn't there? The sources warn against a purely individualistic approach, this atomistic perspective.
Yes, absolutely. It's crucial to challenge the deeply ingrained individualistic or atomistic perspective of self-realization that's so pervasive, especially in modern Western cultures.
Okay, what exactly is the atomistic perspective, and why is it problematic when we're talking about self-realization or growth?
The atomistic view essentially holds that the self is a completely independent, isolated unit like an atom, bouncing around on its own. It assumes the individual is solely responsible for their own success or failure, forging their path alone.
The rugged individualist idea.
Exactly. And while independence is valuable, this extreme view is flawed because the self is fundamentally inescapably socially embedded and mutually interdependent.
We don't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all. Trying to self-realize entirely alone isn't just incredibly difficult. It's often psychologically draining and less effective. Why? Because our identity is largely constituted in dialogical relations with others.
Dialogical relations.
Through conversation, through shared experiences, through getting recognition and feedback, through participating meaningfully in a community or close relationships. We figure out who we are, partly by seeing ourselves reflected in the eyes of trusted others.
So even if you're making radical internal changes, it's not really a solo project. It needs witnesses, support, context.
It absolutely cannot be purely solo for sustained change. Strong relationships provide vital stability, a crucial, solid base, as some researchers call it, especially during stressful life events and transitions. like the ones common in midlife.
How does that social structure help the new narrative?
It helps affirm it. It helps sustain it. When others see and acknowledge the changes you're making, the new identity you're trying to build, it becomes more real, more anchored. And the research is particularly clear for women, actually.
In what way?
Studies consistently highlight that reciprocal spousal support and also close, supportive girlfriends are vital for sustaining health, well-being, and resilience through the specific stressors of midlife. That social connection is protective.
Okay, so connection is key. Now, what about the unavoidable tough stuff? Existential vulnerability, things like physical aging, illness, maybe losing parents, or facing financial insecurity. Does confronting these harsh realities automatically stop growth? Does it push you back into stagnation?
It's a common fear, but the research suggests the opposite can be true. Self-realization, genuine growth is emphatically not impeded by existential vulnerability.
Really, not impeded.
In fact, confronting vulnerability, truly facing it, is often the necessary catalyst for the deepest, most profound kinds of growth.
How does that work? Facing limitations fuels growth.
Because the process demands that you actively develop crucial virtues, things like courage, perseverance, self-acceptance, practical wisdom, maybe forgiveness. These virtues are what help people respond to the inevitable demands of life, the pain, the loss, the physical changes in what the philosophers call an excellent or good enough, or simply a virtuous way.
Wow, that dramatically reframes adversity, doesn't it? Resilience isn't about somehow avoiding the challenges.
No, you can't avoid them all.
It's about the quality of your response to them.
That is exactly right. Resilience, in this view, is fostered by a strong internal belief system, things like inner trust, a sense of initiative, hope, optimism, and what the psychologist Erik Erikson famously called generativity.
Generativity, the desire to contribute something beyond yourself.
Yes, the desire to create or nurture things, people, ideas that will outlast the individual self. That sense of purpose is deeply resilience building. These qualities allow individuals to actively make meaning out of adversity.
How? By integrating it.
By integrating the challenges into their coherent life story. For example, some individuals who faced intense challenges in midlife, like a sudden job loss, a serious illness, a major betrayal, they found strength in their core beliefs, maybe a fierce commitment to their family, or a deep spiritual faith.
And that helped them process it.
It helped them integrate the adversity into their narrative, not as the end of the story, but as a necessary formative battle.
Yeah.
A chapter that forged their current character. It marks them, yes, but it doesn't stop them. And that is the fundamental difference between letting something become a crisis and integrating it as a challenge overcome.
So, reflecting on everything we've unpacked today, it seems clear that midlife is far less about some sudden, inevitable crisis and far more about a profound crossroad, a moment of choice.
A real pivot point.
Yeah, a pivot point between maybe passively accepting decline or stagnation and intentionally forging a new identity, a new path. And it seems driven by that consistent behavior change we talked about.
Absolutely. And redefining your purpose, but doing so within a supportive social context.
Yeah.
Not in isolation.
And the scientific insight, that volitional personality change research, it really proves that deep change isn't just some fuzzy aspiration. It's actually an achievable goal.
It is. But only when you move past just wishful thinking, past the intention, and focus almost religiously on the daily, concrete actions, the behavioral completion.
Right. The 40-year-old starting a new career, the 60-year-old cycling the globe, they didn't just want it. They successfully bridged that intention-action gap through disciplined action.
After day.
The power, therefore, it seems, lies entirely in our hands. In your hands, listening. Success in life, growth, it really seems to boil down mainly to the choices and the actions we take.
Or sometimes the choices and actions we fail to take. That inaction is also a choice.
True.
To leave you with a powerful thought, consider something the writer and speaker John Rohn observed about this unique human capacity for choice.
What did he say?
He said something like, every life form seems to strive to its maximum except human beings. How tall will a tree grow? As tall as it possibly can. Human beings, on the other hand, have been given the dignity of choice.
The dignity of choice, that puts the responsibility squarely on us.
It does.
So the final provocation for you listening is this. If you're feeling average right now, maybe stuck, maybe no closer to your ideal self this year than you were last year, what specific belief are you allowing to hold you back? And maybe more importantly, what single concrete daily action starting right now are you willing to commit to changing, to leverage your remaining precious seconds and begin forging that new path for your evolving identity?
You have the dignity of choice.
What will you do with it?